let me say that there is a question that I know to be absolutely fundamental. And I know it to be fundamental because it shows up both in the Hebrew Bible and in Plato.
Okay.
In Plato, it shows up in the very first sentence of Plato's Phaedrus. And in the Hebrew Bible, it shows up when Hagar runs away from Sarah for the first time, and the angel comes to her in the wilderness. And the question is, where have you been and where are you going?
Yeah, right. There's a question.
Now, for me, this is absolutely fundamental for individuals, for families, for tribes, for nations, for societies. And I view it as an urgent question today.
Well, it's probably the question. It's at least one variant of the question of identity.
Yes.
Right? We're in an identity crisis, obviously. We've cascaded into identity politics.
Right.
And given your frame here, you could say, well, the reason for that is because we don't know where we've been.
Yes.
And certainly there's no unified sense of that, which is a big problem. And we don't know where we're going. You could add maybe one other foundation stone to that, which would be, where have you been? Where are you now? And where you're going.
Yes.
That's a full narrative, really, right? So, so let's just focus on these.
Yeah. So
why did that capture your interest specifically?
Well, I mean, first of all, it seems to me that each part of that, and let's say, where are you now?
Yeah.
Okay, this is crucial. No part of it can be answered without the answers to the other two. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Because, look, the future is trackless. Where are we going? Well, our only resource really is, where are we now and where have we been? More fully, I would say that, and this is just my hypothesis, but I think there's a lot to it, that there are no really fruitful growths in the future that don't come out of the soil of the past. That is to say, a rich understanding of the past. And we could do this.
Spoken like a true conservative.
Well, I mean, listen.
But that's the sort of thing that makes you think in a conservative direction once you realize that.
And that's a whole nother interesting thing, because the fact is that, and I've shared this with a lot of colleagues and friends, I actually think that part of the hostility to studying the Western tradition on the part of those who are, antagonistic to the West, comes from the fact that studying the great books actually makes you not only intellectually conservative, but in some ways politically conservative. Conservative enough, for example, to say that we need to study the Western tradition.
Well, right.
They're all related.
Well, the other issue, tell me what you think about this. Yeah. I also think that, if you think about the Maoists, for example, and the fact that, for example, the Red Guards destroyed all the Chinese statues as far up as you could reach with a hammer. We're going to obliterate the past and we're going to build the new man in keeping with our, well, there's the question, right? In keeping with our, revolutionary presuppositions. Okay, but then you have to say, well, where did those revolutionary presuppositions come from? They just spring like Athena out of the head of Zeus? They have a history too, or worse, they have a spirit, they have a personality.
Yes.
And this resistance to studying the Western canon, let's say, which is not even exactly Western when you get down to it, right? It's much broader than that.
Yes.
I think it's not only terror, let's say, that you'll become more conservative, but also it's a rebuke to your intellectual hubris, because you can no longer presume that your selfish, power-mad whims, say, are of sufficient significance to be the determinants of the future. You have to subordinate yourself to the tradition.
Yes.
And
right.
I think Luciferian intellects dislike that.
Yes.
And you could be even more cynical than that. You could say that people who are underpaid in relationship to their IQ, that would be professors, are angry enough with their lack of status to elevate their Luciferian presumption to the highest point.
Yes.
And that means they're very interested in dissociating themselves from the canon and making themselves, well, they do the same thing Adam and Eve do. It's like, we're going to make our own values. So,
look, I mean, here's another thing that, you mentioned Mao. Now, as you know, under Mao, the little Shinto shrines and things that people had in their homes were replaced by pictures of Mao. They worshipped Mao.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Mao, Stalin, whoever, these guys had this notion of a new man. We're going to have a new man.
Yeah.
But right, new.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Actually, it's all very, very old. So we were talking about Exodus, and so let me just throw this out. I happen to have just taught a couple of classes on Exodus. I filled in for one of our professors. The way I look at that book, one main thing that's happening there is that book of the Bible is presenting you with the following alternative. Either you enslave yourself to Pharaoh, or you enslave yourself to God. Now,
no, you can also be lost in the desert.
Well, okay.
That's an alternative.
Okay, right.
But that's an important, those are the three.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. Let's just imagine that Moses had never returned and, they got the calf, whatever. Now, that's not going to be a very long-lasting alternative. But
yes.
But what I want to say here is, then the question is, what is Pharaoh? What does Pharaoh mean? What's Pharaoh? Pharaoh is a man god. By the way, aside from the Jews who are trying to start a Hebrew republic and the Greeks, which are these little islands of liberty in a sea of despotism, everyone else is man gods. I mean, the Persian emperor, the Egyptians, etc.
Right. So that means that those societies apprehended a principle of sovereignty abstracted beyond the most powerful man.
Yeah, right.
So that's a very sophisticated view of
and I mean, in, for example, Aeschylus's Persians, which is about the defeat of Xerxes' army in the Second Persian War, Xerxes can't be held to account because he's divine.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so
the buck stops there.
But what's interesting about Pharaoh is that, first of all, it is the not only the most technically advanced, I would even call it a technological civilization. If you've been to Egypt, as I have, you see the pyramids, right? And nobody even knows how these things were made. There are blocks that are much larger than this fairly large room we're sitting in. They made the most amazing jewelry ever produced, and we have a bunch of it just because a bunch of it was shoved in a tiny little room. The burial site of King Tutankhamun. Who knows what the tomb of Ramses had in it? They had these massive granite obelisks and all this stuff. The entire society was dedicated to the elevation and the monumentalization and the memorialization of the pharaoh. Okay, so it's the exaltation of the man god. Well, and so what Pharaoh means today is the elevation of man to a god. Now we do this, by the way. I mean, Freud has this phrase in Civilization and its Discontents about how modern man is a prosthetic god, right? Like we equip ourselves with all these tools and things like this. So that's a huge temptation. But the suggestion of the Bible is, if you go in that direction, you're going to have a kind of totalitarian society, and to be a slave.
You get this dynamic between potentate and slave.
Yes, exactly. But there can be lots of slaves, right? So, for example, in Persia, the emperor, whether it was Xerxes or Darius or Cyrus, everyone else was known as the king's slave, including the members of his family. So you have that. Now, you can do that, but the alternative then is bowing down to God and being a slave, or if you want to put it in a softer way, a servant to God. And the suggestion—
that's what Moses tells the Pharaoh, right? He says, let my people go. So they may worship me in the wilderness, right? It's not anarchy. It's not hedonist. It's not hedonistic freedom of the sort that the golden calf worshippers turn to. Right. It's what would we call it? Ordered freedom, I think, is the general phrase.